welcome to the January 19th, the Westborough Planning Board. We have a full agenda this evening, but first I need to read the governor's order into the record. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order, imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Westborough Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. Members of the public wishing to participate from their remote location are encouraged to email their questions to planning@town.westborough.ma.us. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. The meeting can be viewed on Verizon Channel 24 and Charter Channel 191, or live streamed online at westboroughtv.org. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording transcript or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Thank you for the time there. Our first agenda item is a public hearing on West Park Drive Extension Definitive Subdivision Plan. And we have, I'm sorry, who is here for the applicant? I see Mark Geralt. Who else is speaking for you, Mark?
Dan Feeney.
Oh, hi, Dan. Sorry, I didn't see you.
And Scott Thornton.
Yeah. All right. Jim Robbins, I'm going to turn to you first, though, and just give us a summary of this process so that we understand the purpose of this meeting and the process that will follow in future meetings.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year, the Planning Board approved the preliminary subdivision plan for a new commercial and industrial road extending from the end of the current terminus of West Park Drive along through the property of Caruth Capital to Flanders Road, where the new intersection will create a signalized intersection with a multi-use bike path also, along with the sidewalk and handicap ramps and a pedestrian crossing across Flanders Road. This is the definitive phase. So this is the final phase of the subdivision plan development. This is the phase from which they will move to construction. The project recently received a MassWorks grant for $1.282 million for the construction of the improvements to Flanders Road, as well as the installation of a signalized intersection and all of the associated equipment. This evening, you have Caruth Capital here, Bills and Thomas and Vanessa Associates, to present that plan. This is the opening of the public hearing. The public hearing will remain open until all comments have been received to the satisfaction of the Planning Board, after which they'll have an approved definitive subdivision plan for construction. You're on mute, Mark.
I'm going to turn this over to the applicant to begin their presentation, and then we'll get comments from town departments and questions from the board. And then we can see if there's any questions from the public. Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen here just to put up.
Dan, could you just identify yourself again for the people watching?
Yep. My name's Dan Feeney. I'm a professional engineer at Bales and Thomas. We're the site engineers and surveyors for the project on behalf of the applicant. Just to kind of go over, I'll start with a bigger exhibit, more regional. So as Jim noted, the project consists of both the extension of West Park Drive from its existing terminus to Flanders Road, which is about a 2,200 foot extension. There'll be a proposed traffic signal at Flanders Road. There'll also be some improvements to Flanders Road, including a left turn lane heading eastbound into the site. In addition, there will be a multi-use trail. It's an 8-foot stone dust path that will travel from Flanders Road on the eastern side of the proposed roadway along the 134 Flanders Road western property line before crossing at a crosswalk and then continuing up the western side of the roadway up until the Shell oil easement and then terminating just within the Shell oil easement, in between the proposed roadway and the 118 Flanders Road auxiliary parking lot. Also included in this proposal is another 8-foot stone dust trail that would then connect up from the Shell oil easement back to the northern side of an existing wetland crossing that exists out there. So the items that are subject of the MassWorks grant is the improvements within Flanders Road, the traffic signal, as well as the multi-use trail as it parallels West Park Drive up to the Shell oil easement, and then a small section heading to the west. The rest of it would be both the roadway and the remaining portion of the trail is part of the private development that Kruth would be constructing. So it's sort of both the public and the private developments are tied in together. They support each other, but it is, would be two separate funding. The funding from the MassWorks grant is only for the Flanders Road improvements and that section of the multi-use trail. So the purpose behind extending West Park Drive down to Flanders Road is just for general regional traffic improvements, as well as more specifically for the improvement of the tenants within the Westborough Office Park. It just provides a alternate means of getting out of the site, especially for traffic that wants to head south down to Flanders Road anyway, rather than having to drive all the way around up West Park Drive and around Research, the connector, back over to Flanders. So that's the purpose behind it. There was the ability to put the trail in and provide a public benefit as well. And, Kruth was happy to work with the town on being able to submit the MassWorks grant application and be a partner in that process. The land is zoned in the Industrial B district. It is in the Industrial D overlay district. Most times a definitive subdivision is being done. It's to support the development of new lots. It creates additional lots using the roadway as frontage for that. This definitive subdivision is really just an access maneuver to get down to Flanders Road. It doesn't create any new lots. It will modify 5 lots. You're putting a right of way through 5 properties that are all under the Kruth Capital ownership. So we will be modifying 5 lots, but it's not creating any additional lots. Another benefit to the road is it will provide better access to some of the undeveloped lots that are out there, in addition to providing better access for the existing developments out on the site. We were working around a number of site constraints, the biggest one being down at Flanders Road. As you come up the old Washington Lane right-of-way, there are wetlands immediately to the west of the proposed improvements, and we are tight to the property line with the abutting 134 Flanders Road. And the development of 134 Flanders Road, the existing building and parking lot, does come fairly near the property line over on their side of it. So we were constrained for space down at Flanders Road. And then again, as we as we head north and approach the existing wetland crossing for the 2200 West Park driveway, There is a wetland there that kind of fingers out, and we need a detention basin in that location. So we were kind of squeezed a little bit in there. So we were working around those site constraints. So that kind of dictated a lot of the design. And as we went through the preliminary plan process back last year, we did that kind of set where the roadway would be in relation to the stone dust path based on comments received from the planning board, the bike trail committee, as well as the abutting property owner at 134 Flanders Road. The other thing of note is, as I've mentioned, we are reusing a portion of the 2200 West Park Drive driveway as it crosses over the wetlands, so we don't have additional wetland impacts in that area. And the roadway width is proposed at 28 feet wide, which again is consistent with what we were proposing at the preliminary plan stage. And that allows us to use that existing driveway crossing, convert the existing sidewalk in that location into a portion of the roadway, and thus the need to have the cross-country multi-use trail there to provide non-vehicular access up along the roadway. So the roadway does widen to 33 feet wide as we approach Flanders Road. That allows for a left turn and a right turn out onto Flanders Road from West Park Drive extension. We did have some waiver requests. They're consistent with the waiver requests that were submitted as part of the preliminary plan. The first one being the roadway width. An industrial subdivision roadway per the definitive subdivision regulations is 36 feet wide. We're proposing 28 for the majority of the width. Another waiver request was the type of curbing. To be consistent with the existing West Park Drive, we are proposing a bit Cape Cod berm curbing along the majority of the roadway extension. Along the 134 Flanders Road frontage on both sides of the road, we are proposing the granite curb, which is what the subdivision rules state to use. The multi-use trail is acting as the sidewalk for the proposed roadway. So that's another waiver request because the sidewalk requirements would be a narrower width, but a bit conch surface. So that is another waiver request, as well as the alignment of the roadway within the right-of-way. It's not centered as it would typically be. Again, a lot of that's driven by our space limitations down by the wetlands on Flanders Road. We were able to work with the Conservation Commission. We still have a notice of intent in front of them. We had met informally before filing the notice of intent. So we are as tight to this wetland as we can get down here, which opened up a little bit more room for some of the turning radiuses out onto Flanders Road. At the preliminary plan stage, we had 30-foot radiuses. The subdivision rules require 50. Now we were able to get a 50-foot curb radius on one side and a 45-foot on the other side. So still a little bit short of what the requirements are, but again, we've maxed out our width down here along Flanders Road to be able to provide the best turning radiuses in and out as possible. Caruth has agreed that this section of roadway would be restricted from large tractor trailer trucks. So we think that the radii there works for the type of vehicles that would be using it. We understand that the project is still pending peer review comments, both from the civil site peer review as well as the traffic peer review consultant. So I won't get into too much stormwater tonight, expecting that we'll get those comments and work through those comments with the peer review consultant as well as the town engineering department. In general, the flow from the affected area of the roadway flows to the south down to Flanders Road through either a wetland located centrally between the Middlesex Banks building and where we are. There's a large wetland system, as well as there's a wetland to the east of that where some of the flow from up around the 2200 West Park Drive site drains to. So again, we can get more into that as the project unfolds and we get those peer review comments. As part of the subdivision regulations, we did do a fiscal analysis. It's generic because again, there's no new lots being created. West Park Drive, the existing West Park Drive is a private roadway. It's intended that the new portion of West Park Drive would be private as well. So there's very little impact on town services. There's no new proposed development as part of the definitive subdivision. You know, as we've noted, it may make the existing buildings out here more marketable to tenants. And it does make some of the undeveloped lots out here maybe more attractive from an access standpoint. So we have received comments from various town departments. The fire department has requested fire hydrants. There's an existing water line that exists that comes up the 2200 and loops up to the West Park Drive. They've asked for fire hydrants every 500 feet along that existing water line and for us to show the turning paths of their fire truck into and out of the site. So we'll take care of that. The Conservation Commission had some comments about the stormwater that they understand is being peer reviewed. The building department has commented that we should provide a zoning summary table for each of the lots impacted by the roadway, just showing that all the lots will remain in compliance with the underlying zoning, which we will do. We have checked those things. We haven't formalized it in the table. We have checked to make sure that there won't be any impacts of the minor impacts to the areas of the lots due to the roadway being its own lot once it's established. And the building inspector also requested as-built at the end of the project, which is a standard condition we would anticipate. And the police had no comment at this time. So that's sort of an overview of the proposed roadway. Scott Thornton is on if you want him to go on giving an overview of the traffic study that they performed. We can do that, or we can answer any questions that you have on sort of the on-site stuff.
I think maybe we could wait on the discussion of the traffic study until we have the peer review. I think some of the questions the board may have may be answered in the peer review, and I don't want to be redundant at a future meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just weigh in. We received an email today from McMahon Associates. They will have comments before our next board meeting so that the board and the applicant have an opportunity to review them before our next meeting.
Have we received a copy of the traffic study? The board?
No.
Okay, so
That's what I was saying.
Before we get a presentation on it.
Yes.
So why don't we hold off on the presentation of the traffic study until the continuation of this hearing at our next meeting. All right. I'd like to turn it over, Jim, since you spoke up. Do you have any comments on what was presented tonight other than what was already discussed?
I do not. I think Dan explained well the importance of this road, creating the connection to Flanders Road, relieving commuters from having to go all the way around to Research Drive, to Flanders Road, to Route 9. I think this is a much better option for them to develop the office park as well as for workers in the office park. When we talk about the particulars of the site plan, as far as drainage and utilities concerned, on-site engineering will be coming to the next hearing to discuss that. And our town engineer will receive comments to review prior to those comments going to the planning board. So that's a good way to do it. Lisa's here this evening. If she has anything to add to that, I'd be happy to hear from it.
I actually don't really have anything to add right now specifically, except for I will let the board know that I think the waiver for the roadway width reduction, we're in favor of. I think in this particular case, it's certainly beneficial. for multiple reasons, environmental and just less impervious, just multiple reasons. So we'll definitely have that in our letter that we support that.
All right, any other town departments with comments at this time? I see Fred's here and Chris, I don't know. Okay, so why don't we turn it to the board for questions? Anyone on the board have a question for the applicant, Jim Ball?
No, they answer my questions on the comments from or will be answering. That was my only outstanding question. So I'm fine for now. I would comment the same. I think drawing some of the traffic away from Connector Road that happens for folks that were going to be heading east on Flanders anyway makes an awful lot of sense here. And I think that will be positive all the way around. So I have no other questions right now, Mark.
Tim Parris.
Yeah, the only thing I think I'm concerned about is the waiver for the using bituminous curb. And I guess I'd be inclined to support it if we ended up with a condition that, as I understand it, this is a private way. It's going to remain a private way. And if it stays a private way, then that's fine if it's bituminous curb. But I think if it's ever going to be accepted as a town way, it should end up with granite curbing.
It is intended to be a private way. In the decision, Tim, we could write it to always remain a private way. And in the event that it was ever petitioned to become public, that the developer would have to meet the standards of a town roadway, or the owner of the road would have to meet the standards.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but if we grant the waiver for the width, I wouldn't expect them to like widen it to get it accepted, but I would expect granite curb.
Mhm.
So
We'll have to make that a note of that.
specific.
Why don't we have the applicant weigh in on that, what their intentions are?
We intend to keep it as a private way, but we would agree to putting granite curb if for some unknown reason in the future, we plan to make it a town road.
DPW definitely supports that. Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
Any other questions from the board? I just had a comment. I'm sorry, was there another? Okay, I just had a couple of things. I think I was concerned about the road width from we're not allowing trucking, but I wanted to make sure that the fire department trucks will be able to navigate the road in case of emergency. And it sounds like you addressed that or will be addressing that with the fire department. So I was glad to hear that. And I received an email from a member of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee about the width of the trail. And I understand you have some pinch points that require 8-foot width, but my understanding is that most trail standards would require a 12-foot width. And I'm wondering if it's possible to maintain a 12-foot width in the areas where you don't have pinch points.
No, because I mean, the pinch points are, all along 134 Flanders Road, and then up again where the detention basins are, where it says formerly Washington Lane, and also you need room for the grass strip between the trail and the road. Right? If we're going to plow snow, it provides some buffer. We did offer with the bike committee, especially along 134 Flanders Road, if they wanted to eliminate the grass strip, we would make the trail 10 feet wide there. And that's still open. It's a trade-off, but there is a granite curb along the entire length of 134 Flanders Road. So it's pretty straight too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get comments from the Bike and Pedestrian Committee on that. think it's like you're constricted by the wetlands along a larger portion than I was led to believe, so. Okay, that was my two questions. Anything else?
Mark, it's Tim. I had a question of the applicant, whether they were aware of the Eversource pipeline project proposed along Flanders Road. And if so, if they'd taken a position at all with the utility as an abutter.
We are aware that they are going to be bringing or trying to bring a gas line up the road. And we would work with them and maybe even defer some of the road work portion on Flanders Road until they come through, or have them come through sooner in that area. But I'm sure everyone here, the last thing we want to do is put in a brand new intersection and have the utility come through and dig it all up.
Yeah.
And I believe, Jim, if you want to weigh in, I think we have to award the contract, but we might have up to 3 years to actually do the work. Could be 2 years, but I think it's 3.
For the MassWorks portion of the project, which is Flanders Road, technically in the first year, we're supposed to complete the public work in 1 year. However, MassWorks does allow 3 years to complete the entire project. So when we discuss this with MassWorks staff, hopefully next week, we will make them aware of the gas line and let them know that that is not something that we have control over. Neither us or Caruth have control over that. So that may be an extenuating circumstance to give us an extension for completion of the Flanders Road portion of the project. I think that that's only reasonable, and that is why MassWorks allows amendments to extend the timeline for completion.
Thank you both. That helps.
Okay, any other questions from the board? We need to, I guess, Kristen, were there any comments from the public? Kristen, are you on the call?
Yep, I just checked my email and I don't have anything in the planning email.
I just remind the public watching that any questions can be emailed to planning@town.westborough.ma.us. This does not finish the public hearing. We're continuing to our next meeting. We have, I guess, 2 weeks. Sorry, what is the date of the next meeting? I'll give you that. The second.
February 2nd.
February.
So you'll need a
February
motion to
2nd.
continue.
February 2nd. I'm sorry, March. Yeah, February 2nd, right?
Yes.
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to February 2nd on
Second that, Mark.
the West Park Drive subdivision. All right, Jim Ball seconded. All those in favor, I'll do a roll call. Jim Ball,
Yes.
Tim Paris,
Yes.
Tim Kaler,
Yes, Mark.
Hazel Nurse,
Yes, to continue.
and I vote yes to continue as well. Thank you. We'll see you on the 2nd. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is a minor site plan modification to 118 Flanders Road. And I'm not sure who's speaking to the applicant on this.
This is Dan Feeney from Bales and Thomas again. I can speak along with Mark Verreau on this. So a little while back, we had permitted a parking lot expansion at 118 Flanders Road. And it's for a 59 parking space increase over the existing conditions. And our initial, the plan was correct in that it showed all of the parking spaces. However, the table that showed the parking spaces misidentified the number of existing spaces on the site. So it had identified 421 existing parking spaces with the proposed increase of 59, giving us a total of 480, when in fact there are 451 parking spaces currently. So the addition of the 59 spaces brings us up to 510. So we just updated the zoning summary table and had put a letter together just explaining that difference. And the only impact that would have on the plan would be that by being over 500 parking spaces, we would require one more handicap spot. Handicap spots are based on a percentage of the total parking spaces. So because there was a handicap spot that already had the striping that could be shared with a new handicap space, it doesn't result in the loss of any spaces up there. So that would be the only update to the plan on this. So it was a clerical error on the part of Bales and Thomas on this. So it doesn't change. We're still, proposing the same 59 parking space expansion, but it just takes the total from 480 to 510.
Dan,
Yes.
I have one question. Where the 4 spots are added, sort of right in the center of the screen,
Yeah.
were those the 4 that we agreed to delete with Concom, or was that where it says snow storage now?
It was where it said snow storage. This is the plan that was approved by the Concom.
Okay, I just
We
want,
had 63. And we
Okay.
went to 59.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any
Mr.
questions?
Chairman,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Jim.
Chairman,
Bob.
through you, a question to the applicant. So Dan, just for clarification, because the board is going to have to take a vote if they choose to tonight, that the de minimis change revolves around a miscalculation, I should say, a clerical error in the zoning table regarding the number of parking spaces. What you're requesting is not a change in the total number of parking spaces other than to adjust one handicap space. Is that correct?
That's correct. No change to the proposed additional spaces.
Any further comments?
So another point of information, this is truly a de minimis change. You're not triggering any major amendment to the site plan. They're not altering 5 or 6 or more parking spaces. They're adding one handicap space and they're correcting it, a change to the zoning table.
All right, any questions from the board on this? All right, I will make a motion to approve a minor site plan modification for 118 Flanders Road and find that this is a de minimis change to the site plan approval.
Second that, Mark.
Any discussion of that motion?
One point of order again.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. All those, Jim Robbins, go ahead.
Yeah. Dan, can you give us the name on the plan and the new amended date, just so that we can add that?
Sure. It's parking lot expansion is the name of the plan. Layout materials sheet C 4.1.
And the date?
It was last revised. Hold on one second. I just got to zoom in on this. My eyes aren't what they used to be here. June 25th, 2020.
Thank you.
So I'll accept that as additional information to my motion and consider the motion in effect and seconded. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, I'll do a roll call vote. Tim Paris, how do you vote?
Yes.
Tim Ball,
Yes.
Neil Ramirez,
Yes.
Tim Kaler,
Yes, Mark.
and I vote yes as well. That's 5-0 in favor. Next item on the agenda is Village Commons 1 Gleason Street, the commercial building discussion. Jim Robbins, I'm going to turn it to you to summarize the issue, and then we can move forward from there.
So I'm not sure if Farouk has additional information. I don't have any additional information on you this evening, other than to ask for an update on any changes or additional requests from the engineering department. I know Lisa is here. I was copied on some information regarding inspections, but I'm not sure if that's what this involves.
Farouk, why don't I turn to you for some clarification? Farouk, you just need to unmute yourself, okay? Farouk?
We can't hear you.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, please proceed.
I apologize. I wasn't thinking.
Happens to all of us. Go ahead.
My name is Farouk Ansari, and I'm the developer of the project, Village Commons. And the update between the last meeting and this meeting is we now have an approval from the engineering department for that commercial building. So that was a big thing. And we are now ready to start that as soon as we get the building permit in hand. I'm expecting in a few days I'll have the permit and we're going to get started on it. So there is no delays. Everything has been ordered and it's ready to go. The engineering has approved it.
Okay. Any comments from town departments on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark, if you'll, Fred Leonardo, Building Commissioner.
Yeah, Fred, go ahead.
Sure. So I don't mind if Mr. Ansari starts the construction of the commercial building. We still have one minor thing we have to iron out with him. So I'll contact him or make sure staff does prior to actually issuing the permit, but he can certainly start the project. I just wanted to go back a minute, if we could, on where he stands in the overall project.
Right.
So he has building permits in for all structures out there. They have not been all approved. And one of them goes back to September of 19. Not only held up by building department, by all the town departments. So again, I'm going to probably reach out to Mr. Ansari and have him come in so we can kind of get this straightened out so we get all the permits issued. Just to reiterate, he does have to have the commercial shell built. I did go back to the special permit. He has to have all 5,400 square feet completed. That means completed interior and exterior prior to the issuance of the 14th certificate of occupancy. That would be my understanding by the special permit. And the next certificate of occupancy, which would be the 7th, also has to be the one for the affordable housing unit. So those are kind of my updates.
Farouk, you understand all of that, right?
Yes, I know that I have to get the 3,000 square foot building up, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the building inspector for allowing me to do that. That's what I was waiting for all this time, and you'll see how quickly we'll move on that. I do thank you.
Any questions from the board? All right, Farouk, I just wanted to let you know, in case you weren't aware, we did receive a complaint from a neighbor about the sidewalk in front of 1 Gleason, and I don't believe that Gleason Street is a town maintained, town cleared sidewalk, so that would be your responsibility, and I guess it was somewhat of a hazardous condition in the last snowstorm, so I just ask you to make sure those sidewalks are cleared. Any other issues? All right, Farouk, thank you for coming in, and I think we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you very much.
We have a discussion and vote to approve the Lyman Street sidewalk plans. Jim Robbins, I'll start with you on this, and then we'll hear from, I guess, engineering.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the sidewalk on Lyman Street was a requirement of the special permit that approved the residential development by Pulte Homes, Del Webb, at the Lake Chauncey former state hospital site. Originally, the plans had the sidewalk shown on the western side of Lyman Street. The sidewalk will extend from the state hospital property to the town beach, and then across Lake Chauncey Road, and then onto Route 9. The portion from the state hospital to the town beach is responsibility of the developer. When we did our site walk to look at the concept plan for the sidewalk, we found that there would have been significant disturbance on the west side of Lyman Street if we were to construct the sidewalk there. So we examined the east side of Lyman Street, and we found that the walk could be completely constructed within the public way with minimal disturbance to any residential properties. There were a couple sidewalks held on that new location on the beach parking lot side of Lyman Street. And Chris Payne and Lisa Elaine are here from the Department of Public Works. I will eventually give it over to them to explain before having the developer's engineer explain the actual plan. But the neighbors on that side of the street were notified, and I think Chris will tell you that I was not on the sidewalk myself, but I think Chris will tell you that a couple of the neighbors actually attended that. It's probably a better location because it's flat as opposed to the west side of Lyman, which it definitely would have had to have a lot of slope adjustments and possibly even a retaining wall. So this is a better location. And just to carry on the discussion, I'll turn it over to the Director of Public Works, Chris Payne.
Hey, good evening, Chris Pant, Director of Public Works. I'm actually going to pass it to Nathan from Bowler Engineering. He's going to walk through the concept that's being proposed, and then I'll chime in after his comments are done.
Certainly, thank you, Chris. Let me just share a plan here quickly. So Jim summed it up nicely, but just for the record, my name is Nathan Mahonen with Bowler Engineering, here with Mark Mastriani from Pulte Homes and Chris Payne as well from the DPW. As Jim summarized, the permit was issued for the Del Webb Chauncey Lake project, and the graphic in front of you outlines the location of that extension. It will extend from where the new sidewalk was built down towards Route 9, up the side, cross over at the existing crossing area where the beach is and the parking is, continue on the other side of the road, and then cross back over to connect to the existing sidewalk that's out in front of the Hadley building. As noted, since the special permit, there's been numerous site walks out here between our office, abutters, folks from Pulte Homes, folks from town staff, between DPW and engineering, to look at what the best route is, and this was the ultimate route that was chosen. The formal design plans have been designed and submitted based upon this routing. They have been reviewed and approved by DPW and engineering as of recently to make sure that we were meeting the standards that they were looking for construction of the sidewalk. Also, we have recently, as of within the last week, received our negative determination from the Conservation Commission for work adjacent to the wetlands that is down here on both sides of Lyman Street down towards the lake. With that, I'll pass it back to Chris, and we have some updates and some information generally as to kind of how we arrived at this location and where it is.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Just a couple of comments. First off, Jim mentioned up front that a concept had been, I guess, essentially approved well over a year ago. And when Mark from Pulte approached us last summer to start working on this project, we decided to take a fresh look at it, and that's what we did. And that's why over the last several months, we've been, there's been a lot of discussion about this sidewalk. So on the west side of Lyman Street, on the beach side where that blue icon is. There is a lot of landscaping and vegetation in front of those residents there. We wanted to look at that and see what the possibilities were for going in that direction. And the primary reason for that was to keep the sidewalk on one side of the street and avoid a crossing, which, anytime you add a crossing, you're creating a condition of risk. So we looked at that. Ultimately, we came to a conclusion that it did make sense to cross the street, which is what the plan shows. There's plenty of space on the east side of the sidewalk. It's relatively flat. The crossing point was moved to a location that provides good line of sight for both crossers and drivers. The other thing to keep in mind too is that potentially down the road, and we know this is probably a ways off, but the B-Walt has an option that's a spur that goes up Lyman Street towards the state hospital property. And the bulk of the right-of-way that exists outside of the road itself is on the beach side of the road. And so if at some time down the road, there was going to be work to put a significantly wider than the 5 feet that this sidewalk is going to be, it would almost certainly be on that side of the road. And so this option preserves that right of way for down the road. If that option is ever pursued, we've got the property available to facilitate that project. Down by the beach, where the sidewalk is on the beach side of the street, that sidewalk would also potentially be part of the B-Walt if it ever went that way. But that sidewalk could easily be expanded to accommodate a wider trail, which I think the B-Walt would potentially propose. The other thing on this road is, I think many know that there's the potential, or there was the potential for a gas line. So Eversource was looking at replacing the existing 4-inch line that goes from Route 9 out to the state hospital site. They need to replace that, or they need to improve that line to accommodate future buildings at the Pulte site. So they had proposed a line from Route 9 all the way out to the Pulte site, and that was something we discussed for many months with them. Because of the existing utilities in the road, it doesn't really, it doesn't work. Essentially, I mean, it can't fit in the road and get their needs and also meet the town's needs. So Eversource went back to the drawing board. They're now proposing, or at least exploring, the concept of the replacement line on the south side of Route 9, or I guess, the East Main Street side of Route 9. So they're proposing, or they're reviewing an option that would put a replacement line from East Main Street to Route 9 along Lyman Street. And they seem to think that that will solve their problem for supplying gas to the Pulte site. I can't explain the engineering behind that, but that's what they've determined. And so the town engineer, Lisa, and I have walked it with Eversource. They are basically going to put something on paper to explain that to the town and demonstrate how that would work and how it would fit within the existing utilities that are already there. So that's something to be figured out down the road. But the point is right now it's not a conflict with the sidewalk, because we don't want to put a sidewalk in and tear it up to put a utility in. Eversource is aware that the sidewalk is going in at some point, hopefully this spring, summer. And once it goes in, they're not going to have the opportunity to cut into that sidewalk. So that deconfliction has occurred. So I think that this option is the best one for the town. It gets us a sidewalk relatively soon. It's not something we're going to have to tear out or redo down the road, if we want to expand or add more in terms of bike or pedestrian access, whether that's be walled or anything else, I think this option really just facilitates that down the road if that is pursued. So I guess those are my comments, and unless Mark or Nathan, you have anything to add, over to the board.
Mark, Nathan, anything?
Nothing on.
No, I think Chris and Nathan did a very nice job, and Jim did a very nice job summarizing how we got here and how we work together to ultimately get to the plans that have been submitted and designed.
One additional.
Lisa, you're on. What's that?
Oh, I was just going to say one additional item is that we received a letter from Lisa Elaine, town engineer, today saying that they approved this plan.
I guess that answers my question. Lisa, any further comments on that?
No, I would just thank Nathan and Mark. They really did respond to our comments and questions. We had them do a lot of due diligence work that some people would feel is extra, but we just wanted to make sure that the decision we made was best for DPW and for the residents. And they both willingly have worked with us. So I was just wanted to thank them for that. And I think it's going to really be a great improvement out there once we get it done.
Any questions from the board?
Mark, I have one question. I know originally the sidewalk was planned on the other side of the street. And I know that you had meetings, and you had quite a turnout from the residents there. I wondered when you switched it across, what kind of turnout or comments you had from residents when it went to the other side of the street.
So, yep. So we, like you said, we met with residents on the west side, and then we met with residents on the east side. So we engaged all the abutters on the east side. We had 2 residents actually respond and meet us on site. We did 2 different sidewalks, and they were both very accommodating. They wanted to just understand what was happening behind their house. But they were actually, one of them was on the corner of Canfield and Lyman, where there's a slope in the yard. So their yard is going to be, out of all of the yards, theirs will probably be the most significantly impacted. And they were absolutely very accommodating and were just interested in the town, getting a nice sidewalk. And, the end state, they're going to have, it's going to work out well for them. But the point is that the residents that we engaged were supportive of the option that we've recommended. So 2 out of, I guess, half a dozen or so on that side of the road. We knocked on some doors and just didn't really get feedback, but the effort was certainly made to engage all of the residents.
Thank you.
Any other comments questions from the board?
Mark.
Jim Ball.
I just want to stress again that the effort that was made by all parties to include all of it, having to be a resident there. There was a lot of engagement consistently throughout the process, and it's highly appreciated. A lot of opportunities for us to give feedback on the impacts, and I think all of the folks on certainly the west side are very satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah, they are.
Anything from Tim or Tim?
No, it all looks good to me.
So I want to kind of echo the comments about the effort that DPW and the town have made to reach out and listen to the abutters' concerns. I think anytime a project goes through the right of way, we can design it how we want, but we we do need to listen to the abutters, and I think that was done in this case. I actually like the additional crossings for a number of reasons. I voiced this in the master plan transportation. I'm concerned about the speed limit along there. And as much as I don't want crossings, I think that that'll slow down traffic to some degree, and the town will need to look at further traffic calming measures, particularly if Northborough continues to develop on their side of the town line. But I don't think that's the responsibility for Pulte Homes to do. I think that's something the town needs to look at in the future. I am wondering, are we putting in those high visibility signals on the new crosswalks and the existing? I know there's one at the beach crosswalk, but I don't know if there's one at the Hadley driveway and the new crosswalk that'll be put in.
Those are proposed on the plans, Mark.
Okay, so those will be, so all three crosswalks along there will have the high visibility. So I'll save my further commentary on, traffic calming and alignment for future meetings, and get off of that soapbox for now. And just say thank you to everybody for, I think, what will be a beneficial thing for the existing residents and the future residents of that project. So with that being said, do we have a vote to take on this, or, okay, you need us to vote to approve this plan. All right, I can't read the date. Let me see if I can zoom this. Do we have a date or a reference that I can reference in a motion?
Nathan, do you have a plan block with the name and date on it?
Yes, the name of the plans would be proposed sidewalk improvements, dated January 14th, 2021.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve proposed sidewalk improvements on Lyman Street dated January 14th, 2021.
I'll second that motion, Mark.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call again. Jim Ball?
Yes, Mark.
Okay, Tim Paris?
Yes.
Hazel Harris?
Yes to approve.
Tim Kaler?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well to approve. That's 5-0 in favor.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for making this a good project.
Good
Thank you.
luck. We look forward to seeing the sidewalks.
So the next item on the agenda is a planning board appointment to the Land Prioritization Committee. And I'm going to ask Jim to summarize this committee. I was at the selectmen meeting. I'll let Jim summarize this new committee that the selectmen are forming, and then we can discuss anticipation.
Yes, so thank you. The selectmen would like to form a land prioritization committee, and with the goal of looking at all vacant properties in town, and ranking them according to value for municipal use. That would include open space as well as for constructed municipal purposes. We have such a plan that we developed probably 15 years ago, and it was called a vacant property inventory. And we divided the town properties into two categories, those that were 5 acres or less and those that were 5 acres or more. And we evaluated each one of those properties for their buildability and their desirability for a municipal purpose. So we ranked them according to whether they were dry upland or whether they were wet, whether they had significant environmental characteristics that we wanted to protect, say, our water supply, or maybe we were protecting a vital ecosystem or a natural habitat for our wildlife. We then looked at engineering qualities of the land. Where was it situated? Did it have good access, a good line of sight to promote public safety for both sidewalks and vehicular traffic? And then we ranked them according to their location. So in other words, a property that might be very similar to each other. One is on the outskirts of town, one is in the center of town. If we found the one in center of town was close to, say, a school or other public facilities, it would get a higher ranking. The selectmen would like to undertake that process again. Over the years, some of the vacant parcels have been developed either commercially or residentially. Some of them have been purchased by the town, so they're no longer part of the inventory. We want to update the inventory. And just for your purposes, just so you know, we had a team before that sat down and looked at every one of these properties, and this was prior to GIS. So this was a lot of really busy work, time-consuming task. And that study group was made up of myself, the town engineer, a member of the Conservation Commission, and someone's appointed by the Board of Selectmen. I don't know what the composition will be this time, other than I know they want someone from the planning board, which I think is a good idea.
Is this all properties, Jim? Meaning privately owned open space?
Privately owned vacant property. Yeah.
Okay. And then do they count the buildings like on the municipally owned buildings that may be vacant at this time? Are those included?
No, because they're already publicly owned.
Okay, so this is only developable property.
Well, it might not be developable. It's all private vacant land. It could be private swamp, but then it would get a very low rating.
Got it. Thank you.
Jim, would we include things like the old Lyman properties that I know are privately held and technically have a building on them, but would it include things that maybe have the potential to be changed or renovated? Because I know the master plan that's been addressed, some of these properties that have been abandoned, so to speak. Is there a way to include those?
So you mean the old Lyman School property that's owned by the state?
Well, aren't a couple of the buildings along there by the courthouse, for instance, actually owned privately, but they've just sat there in disrepair, or any other maybe abandoned building that is hopefully going to be, redone or rebuilt? Should that be included rather than just purely vacant land?
So that's a good point. We did not do that in the last study because it had a building on it, and obviously that property that you point out particularly was at that time owned by the state. But you're right, we probably should look at abandoned or neglected properties as well, because that would capture those two that you have in mind.
Yeah, Jim, I think it's important to not just consider vacant land on this committee. I can remember, 5 or 6 years ago, there was an acre lot with a house on it next to the golf course that was up for sale, and the copper had been stripped, and I always thought it was a shame that the town didn't look at buying that acre and adding to the golf course, basically. I think that this committee should hopefully analyze needs, not just for vacant space, but the potential for adding, for purchasing other land that may already be developed, but might be useful for the town.
So I assume, and this is just an assumption, that once this group is formed, when they have their first meeting, they'll outline the parameters for the properties they're going to look at. And I think that that's a good place to suggest that. We didn't do it last time, doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. I think it's a good point. And when Jim Ball brought up the point of the 2 vacant buildings that are basically fire traps at this point, they should be on that list, because if they were to become available, we might be interested. And I'm not saying those particular properties, but there might be other properties in very similar circumstance that we would be interested in.
I don't know whether it's come before the board before, but there's a decrepit property at the base of High Street, my street, on Main Street, on East Main, just adjacent to the mobile building. Beautiful, beautiful old historic building. No one's living in it. And I see, Hazel, you're sort of smiling. I'm just so, every time I walk by, I'm like, wow, what we could do with an affordable housing trust money to improve it.
I do know that there are conversations about that. I think Fred guess Fred has left us. He probably has the best information on it than unless Jim has more. But I do know the town is well aware of that building, and they are trying to work actually with the State Attorney General's office, I believe, where there is some financing or loan available to do some work on that, and that's what they're trying to do with it. So I think that is actively being looked at. Jim, am I correct on that?
It was at one time. I don't know that it still is, but you're correct. That's a beautiful Greek revival home. It's the best example in town, actually, of that. And since it has such good access and high visibility, it should be restored. It would be great if that were bought by somebody who's forward thinking and converted to, say, three units, a multifamily home. It has been historically a multifamily home.
So would that fall into the category that Jim Ball talked about, where it seems abandoned, but we don't know? I probably shouldn't have singled out that one, but are there other residential properties like that appear abandoned?
So I think
we have any means of determining that?
Yeah, so I think Jim made the point that once the committee is formed, they'll set out a mission statement and determine whether that type of property should be included in the inventory. And I would argue that it should be, and given a ranking similar to open space, or, so that the town has an idea of what priorities to follow and future decision-making. So I think that is properties like that should be discussed by this committee, and whoever we appoint to represent the board can hopefully make the case for that. Do we have any volunteers? Well, I would like to be on the committee. I think it'll be time intensive. I may end up representing open space, but I'm hoping that we can get somebody else from open space to step up. So
I would be interested. I'm going to step down as historical commission chairman and let somebody else take over the work there. So it's something I obviously be interested in, and from the historical viewpoint, and also from just vacant properties in town. But,
right.
So I'm sort of giving up one position to move into another, but at the same time, I think it's always a good idea to kind of change your viewpoint a little bit.
I think this will be kind of a high intensive commitment to begin, and then hopefully not as intensive of a commitment as the historical commission. So
right.
I'm hoping you'll feel less, I'll put it this way, I'll nominate Hazel North to be the representative of the planning board on the land prioritization committee.
I will quickly second that.
Thank you, Jim.
Any discussion? All those in favor, we'll do a roll call. Tim Kaler?
Yes.
Tim Paris?
Yes.
Jim Ball?
Yes.
Hazel Nurse?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That's 5-0 in favor of Hazel's appointment. Thank you.
So another,
Hazel, I was just going to comment, I will happily sit in for you on occasion if you have conflicts. It interests me. I'm just concerned about my availability at the moment.
Sure. Thank you.
I want to just say I appreciate everybody's interest. This is, I think it'd be a very valuable committee in the near future. So Hazel, thank you for stepping forward. And Mark, I'm sure you're going to step forward from the open space side. Just knowing you, you'll want to be involved in that. So while I've got you both here, what I would suggest you do is, because you're going to call in staff, you're probably going to say you want the town engineer and the building commissioner maybe, and the conservation officer and the town planner as advisors to this group. When you do that, the first thing you should do is ask for them to be present while you discuss what properties, what are the parameters, what's the methodology for the properties you're going to look at. So for example, tonight you brought up the issue of looking at abandoned structures or properties that have buildings that are abandoned. that is different than what we did before. I think you should have those people in the room so that they can advise you if you have a question. Well, how difficult would this be to do? And I would say, if I were in the room, I'd say we need the town assessor, because the town assessor knows the properties that are abandoned, because you can bet that the property owner, when they receive their tax bill, appeals it. So they're going to have an idea of properties that we may not be aware of because we drive by them, we may not know what's going on. And the other thing I would do that we didn't do before is we should rank the state properties, like the state hospital. Now it's being developed. It should have been on that inventory. All of the Lyman School properties, we know how bad state of repair they're in the woods. All of the state agricultural land and the fish and wildlife property should be on that inventory, because they surplus the state hospital. We need to be ready to act. You never know when the state may let go of a piece of land.
Yeah, the DYS facilities should be on the list.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree
All the
with
state properties should be on the list.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that concerns me about properties from a historical viewpoint in town is that I think it's also important to look at properties which may have historical value, which, are becoming derelict, and, it's this demolition by, what's the word I wanted?
Neglect.
Properties around that are falling into the category of demolition by neglect, which really concern me, because, then they come in to get a demolition permit, and by then the property's in such bad shape that there's not much you can say. So I think it's important to be aware of the status of properties in town. If you're driving around town, we all see properties that obviously look neglected and, need work on them. And, and I think the town, to be forward-looking, should have information on these properties and see whether the town can assist in renovating or working on these properties with a homeowner to, to preserve them. So I think there are a number of categories that probably people hadn't thought up before when they were originally looking at these types of buildings.
Okay. I don't think we have much more to discuss on the Land Prioritization Committee, unless I'm mistaken. So why don't we move on to the master plan update, and then we can do minutes. Jim Robbins, you want to give us an update on the master plan?
Yes, thank you very much. So anyone that's sitting on one of the subcommittees, and I think everyone here on this call is on a subcommittee, your comments on your chapters and any revisions on your goals need to be into VHB to be submitted to the advisory committee the end of this week. Originally it was going to be the 18th. I think it's now the 21st, although if Kristen's listening, I could have those dates wrong. But the next committee meeting is the 27th, Thursday, the 27th. So keep that in mind. That's our next full advisory committee meeting. Let's see, so since I've been out for a few weeks and I'm catching up myself, I know that my committee, the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee, has been having discussions about our next phase already because we've completed our write-up. But one thing I want to encourage you all to do, if you have another interest outside of your subcommittee, please look at that subcommittee. So for example, I'm interested in economic development, so I'm going to look at their chapter. We ask that if you do look at other chapters and you have suggestions, that you submit those suggestions prior to the 27th so that that subcommittee can see your thoughts, and then they can be incorporated by the subcommittee. So for example, I'm thinking about the downtown, and I want to make sure that there's a comprehensive wastewater management plan done so that we can encourage additional multifamily residential in the downtown. That would be a suggestion I would make for that particular subcommittee. if you have something similar for another subcommittee, don't just be thinking about your own. But we can discuss this on the 27th when the advisory committee reconvenes.
Okay. All right. Any questions on the master plan? All right, so I guess we'll move on to minutes. Jim Ball, I'll turn it over to you.
Actually,
Sure,
Mark.
Mark. Go ahead,
one
Chris.
second. Were we going to talk about, did you want to talk, Jim, about the replacement for Lee Emery onto the master plan advisory committee, or not tonight?
Oh, did we have a, yeah, we have, I don't think we have to approve that, Kristen, because Lee Emery was the Board of Selectmen representative, and I think the way we had structured the master plan committee was that the Board of Selectmen would have a representative, so they voted to represent, to have, did they vote to replace her, or do we need to ask them to replace her? Is that what you're asking? I don't think they voted to replace her, so we maybe need to put a request in to the Board of Selectmen to replace Lee Emery on the master plan committee.
I think you're right. Kristen, can you make a note of that in the minutes, and then also make a note of it to remind me? I'll reach out to Christie to ask them to replace Lee on the board. On the committee, rather.
Committee. Yeah. So, thank you, Kristen, for bringing that up. I forgot about that. All right.
Thank you, Kristen. Good point.
Jim Ball, I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute.
Sure. I think everyone received a copy of minutes through Kristen from Destiny for the January 5th meeting. Any questions on those minutes? If not, I would move for approval on those.
Second that motion.
Okay, Tim Kaler seconded. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call. Tim Kaler,
Yes.
Tim Paris,
Yes.
Hazel Nurse,
Yes, to approve.
Jim Ball,
Yes, Mark.
and I vote yes as well. It's 5-0 to approve those minutes. Any other business, Jim Robbins?
I have no further business. I'll keep you updated if something comes up. I'll be sure to send you an email.
Okay. I have nothing else, so I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second that, Mark?
Okay, Jim Ball seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, that's 5-0 in favor. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good evening.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
See ya.
Jim, how's your